Hey folks, Andrew here, and I am with Rob Workman, the writer of the review of Wolfenstein: The New Order. Rob, how are you today?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm just going to ask you some couple questions about your review.
Sure.
What is your overall take on Wolfenstein: The New Order?
Well, I was really surprised by how much it was going back to the roots of the series. You see, like, you remember the 2009 release of Wolfenstein by Activision. It kind of strayed a little bit. It did the supernatural thing, didn't really focus more on, like, the kind of stuff that Return to Castle Wolfenstein nailed so well. Wolfenstein: The New Order, I believe, is a nice return to form for that. It's a matter of just, B.J. Blazkowicz blasting the living crud out of Nazis, and it follows a great storyline that introduces good secondary characters and actually introduces a great alternate storyline thing that I'll get into as we get further on in our interview. But I really think it goes back to the roots of the series, and I think fans are really going to enjoy that, even with some of the slight problems I ran into with the game. I think overall it's a fantastic shooter. I mean, I gave it an 8 out of 10. I felt it was problematic in some places, but overall, I mean, it just captures the flow of what the series is about, and it just lets you kick a bunch of ass. That's the primary focus, I think.
Of course. Ed, after reviewing the game, do you still think it deserves an 8 out of 10 now that you've sat on it and you thought about it a little more? Do you still think 8 out of 10 is the score that it deserves?
I still think it's a score that it deserves, and I'm not the only one. I actually checked a few of my peers' reviews, and they're in the same level. They said, yeah, there is some stuff that could have been fixed with this game, but overall, I mean, it definitely has that sort of like where you feel like you're in the zone when you're going through these action stages or when you're taking the stealth approach. I mean, there's just so many ways to approach this, and it's really, I think, well deserving of that 8 out of 10. I wouldn't change it.
Okay, now here's a double question. What is your favorite thing about the game, and what is your least favorite thing about the game?
My favorite thing about the game is just how accessible it is. I mean, if you want to rampage through it and shoot everybody with automatic shotguns, you can. But if you want to take the stealth approach, it works just as well. I think the fact that it caters to both different kinds of audiences is really something. But I mean, honestly, I like the action approach in the game. So when I'm presented with that, I don't care if alarms are going off. Give me more targets. I just want to shoot stuff. It's just the sort of thing. But I know people are like, well, the classic Wolfenstein game, he doesn't want to really get caught by the Nazis, right? So wouldn't you want to sneak through it? So having that option is great too. Being able to stealth, and you earn a few perks in the side as well, which is nice. So you're offered a little bonus if you do play the traditional way. But if you want to just be action, you could do that. As far as what I disliked, I think the thing that threw me off here, there were two things. Number one, I wasn't too crazy about how the game cut from real-time gameplay to cutscene and then back to real-time gameplay. Like a lot of games these days, when they tell a story, usually they do it in the game. They don't cut away to cinemas or anything like that. I mean, maybe Machine Games wanted to return to that classic style with Wolfenstein, but it's a little bit jarring. It takes a little bit of getting used to, and some people will just skip over the movies because of that, and they'll miss out on some of the story as a result. The second thing is there are these sequences in the game where before you do anything with a certain item, you have to like look around for stuff. Like, for instance, you're doing an interrogation scene and there's this chainsaw on the table, right? And you're like, oh, I'm going to interrogate this guy with a chainsaw. But it's like, nope, you need to have protective gear first. I mean, this is after I went rampaging through a castle and I'm bloodied and I'm beaten. Now I'm worried about protective gear? Really? I'm like, if you look around enough, you'll find it, but it would have been helpful to have like an indicator so we could just move forward, we could find the item, and we can move back to what makes the game important, getting to the action sequences. Mm-hmm. I think Machine Games probably could have done without that. I mean, otherwise, it plays really well, so I can't complain there.
Okay, well, what do you think of the story and the plot of New Order? Do you think it's good? Do you think it's like worth to talk about, or is it just...
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is where the alternate storyline thing comes into play, because there is a great story here. I mean, Blazkowicz's return isn't just a flash in the pan, I'm back, everything like that. No, there's some depth to it. He's actually out of action for several years after the beginning of the game, and he winds up in an asylum. And just the way that the game unfolds after that is really... it's surprising because, like with Wolfenstein, you expect, I'm just going to run in, I'm going to rampage everything. But no, there's a little bit of backstory to it. Now, the thing that I find interesting is there's a way to take two different alternate storylines. At one point in the game, you have to decide for a mad scientist, because your guys are captured, you have to decide which soldier he's going to do a project on. And how your decision affects the gameplay is really interesting because there are two different ways it can go, and thus two different approaches to it. And it's kind of cool. I mean, eventually, you're still doing the same thing. You're still running through and shooting, shooting Nazis and all that stuff, taking on robots. But just the fact that you could play through the game again and get like a different perspective depending on the storyline that you take, I find that really cool. I think it adds a nice little wrinkle to an otherwise, I'd be like, oh, okay, it's just Blazkowicz versus Nazis. There's no story there, but there is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Jumping back to a gameplay question, in a lot of games we see when they try to incorporate stealth and run and gun action and cover-based shooting, it kind of gets a little watered down. So
yeah,
like
especially the forced stealth. When you have to go through a game and you're stuck in the stealth stage and you hate it and everything. That's why I like Wolfenstein's approach to, you could either play stealth-wise or you could play action-wise, and there's no penalties either way. You'll earn more perks with stealth, but if you want to just go and shoot everybody and, pick up whatever health packs you get, that's the classic Wolfenstein way. I'm glad that's included. So to answer your question, I think the fact that it does both so well, I mean, it's easily like one of the more accessible shooters I've run into over the past few months. It's been really cool how accessible it is. And I didn't mean to cut you off, by the way.
Oh, no, you basically answered my question, because that's what I wanted to hear, so thank you.
Welcome.
Wolfenstein is considered the grandfather or even the father of first-person shooters. Does New Order live up to that legacy? Does it continue the Wolfenstein line with respect?
It doesn't just carry the legacy, I think it returns to it. Like I said, I was thrown off by 2009's release from Activision, so I'm happy to see this sort of game come back and just get back into the raw, gutsy roots that Blazkowicz has become known for. As a matter of fact, there's a nice little Easter egg in the game that actually pays tribute to the legacy. When you're in the Resistance Hub, go all the way to the top floor. You'll find a mattress on the floor. Go ahead and walk up to it, and it says Nightmare. Go ahead and prompt that, and you'll play the first level Wolfenstein 3D with the modern B.J. Blazkowicz. It's actually very cool Easter egg.
Fascinating.
And it pays tribute to the series. I think Machine Games paid close attention to what made the original games work, Wolfenstein 3D, Return to Castle Wolfenstein, and they incorporated it into a well-placed shooter here that I think both fans and people looking for this visceral first-person shooter experience are really going to enjoy.
Awesome. A lot of modern games, especially first-person shooters, kind of either shoehorn or definitely include multiplayer. Granted, there are exceptions like BioShock, but do you think that Wolfenstein: The New Order needed multiplayer? Do you think it's lacking because of it, or do you think it's fine as a standalone single-player game?
This could go either way, because Return to Castle Wolfenstein had a great multiplayer component. But by the same token, I think this is more Blazkowicz's story. I think watering it down with a cheaply added multiplayer mode with Nazis versus rebels probably wouldn't have done the single-player mode any favors. I mean, let's be honest, there are games out there that are established for multiplayer experience, Titanfall, Call of Duty, stuff like that. This feels more like a return to form for Blazkowicz rather than a game that demands multiplayer. I know some people are probably going to miss the multiplayer component. They'll be a little sore about it. But considering the single-player mode goes the way it does with twin storylines, with hidden treasures that you could find, with the bonus Easter egg I just described. I mean, I really think it's a well-rounded single-player experience, like BioShock Infinite was. And I don't think multiplayer would have done it any favors. Would some people have played it? Yeah, but it probably would have gone the way of like BioShock 2. It probably would have been like a one-and-done deal and then faded away into obscurity. So I kind of like how Machine Games focused on single-player. I know some people miss it, the multiplayer part of it, but, that's where they have Return to Castle Wolfenstein for. Okay. I really think this game does just fine on its own without multiplayer, but that's just my opinion.
Okay, all right, that's an understandable opinion. Thank you so much for this call and this interview. If you guys want to check out the review, be sure to go on to shacknews.com.